The 13th Book of Homer's Iliads, Part 1. The Argument. Neptune, in pity of the Greeks' hard plight, like Calchas, both the Ajaces doth excite, and others to repel the charging foe. Idomeneus bravely doth bestow his kingly forces, and doth sacrifice Othryoneus to the destinies, with divers others. Fair Deiphobus and his prophetic brother Helenus are wounded, but the great Priamides, gathering his forces, heartens their address against the enemy, and then the field a mighty death on either side doth yield. Another argument. The Greeks, with Troy's bold power dismayed, are cheered by Neptune's secret aid. Jove helping Hector and his host, thus close Argive fleet, he let them then their own strength try, and season theirs sweet with ceaseless toils and grievances. For now he turned his face, looked down, and viewed the far-off land of well-rowed men in Thrace, of the renowned milk-nourished men, the Hippomolgians, long-lived, most just and innocent, and close-fought Mysians. Nor turned he any more to Troy his ever-shining eyes, because he thought not any one of all the deities, when his care left the indifferent field, would aid on either side. But this security in Jove the great sea-rector spied, who sat aloft on the utmost top of shady Samothrace, and viewed the fight. His chosen seat stood in so brave a place, that Priam's city, the Argive ships, all Ida did appear to his full view, who from the sea was therefore seated there. He took much ruth to see the Greeks by Troy sustain such ill, and mightily incensed with Jove, stooped straight from that steep hill, that shook as he flew off, so hard his parting pressed the height. The woods and all the great hills near trembled beneath the weight of his immortal moving feet. 3 steps he only took, before he far off Aegis reached, but with the 4th it shook with his dread entry. In the depth of those seas he did hold his bright and glorious palace, built of never-rusting gold, and there arrived, he put in coach his brazen-footed steeds, all gold-maned and paced with wings, and all in golden weeds he clothed himself. The golden scourge, most elegantly done, he took, and mounted to his seat, and then the god begun to drive his chariot through the waves. From whirl-pits every way the whales exulted under him, and knew their king. The sea for joy did open, and his horse so swift and lightly flew, the under-axle-tree of brass no drop of water drew. And thus these deathless coursers brought their king to the Argive ships. Twixt the Imber cliffs and Tenedos, a certain cavern creeps into the deep sea's gulfy breast, and there the earth-shaker stayed, his forward steeds, took them from coach, and heavenly fodder laid in reach before them. Their brass hooves he girt with gyves of gold, not to be broken nor dissolved, to make them firmly hold a fit attendance on their king, who went to the Argive host, which, like to the tempest or wild flames, the clustering Trojans tossed, insatiably valorous, in Hector's light command, high-sounding and resounding shouts for hope cheered every hand, to make the Greek fleet now their prize, and all the Greeks destroy. But Neptune, circler of the earth, with fresh heart did employ the Grecian hands. In strength of voice and body he did take Calchas' resemblance, and of all the Ajaces first bespake, who of themselves were free enough. Ajaces, you alone sustain the common good of Greece, and ever putting on the memory of fortitude, and flying shameful flight. Elsewhere the desperate hands of Troy could give me no affright. The brave Greeks have withstood their worst, but this our mighty wall, being thus transcended by their power, grave fear doth much appall my careful spirits, lest we feel some fatal mischief here, where Hector, raging like a flame, doth in his charge appear, and boasts himself the best God's son. Be you conceited so, and fire so, more than human spirits, that God may seem to do in your deeds, and with such thoughts cheered, others to exhort, and such resistance. These great minds will, in as great a sort, strengthen your bodies, and force check to all great Hector's charge, though ne'er so spirit-like, and though Jove still, past himself, enlarge his sacred actions. Thus he touched, with his forked scepter's point, the breast of both, filled both their spirits, and made up every joint with power responsive. When, hawk-like, swift, and set sharp to fly, that fiercely stooping from a rock, inaccessible and high, cuts through a field, and sets a fowl, not being of her kind, hard, and gets ground still. Neptune so left these two, either's mind beyond themselves raised. Of both, which Iliad first discerned the masking deity, and said, Ajax, some god hath warned our powers to fight, and save our fleet. He put on him the hue of the augur Calchas. By his pace in leaving us I knew, without all question, 'twas a god. The gods are easily known, and in my tender breast I feel a greater spirit blown to execute affairs of fight. I find my hand so free to all high motion, and my feet seem feathered under me. This Telamonius thus received. So, to my thoughts, my hands burn with desire to toss my lance. Each foot beneath me stands bare on bright fire, to use his speed. My heart is raised so high, that to encounter Hector's self I long insatiately. While these thus talked, as overjoyed with study for fight, which God had stirred up in their spirits, the same God did excite the Greeks that were behind it fleet, refreshing their free hearts and joints, being even dissolved with toil, and seeing the desperate parts played by the Trojans past their wall, grief struck them, and their eyes sweat tears from under their sad lids, their instant destinies never supposing they could scape. But Neptune, stepping in, with ease stirred up the able troops, and did at first begin with Teucer and Peneleos, the hero Leitus, Deipyrus, Meriones, and young Antilochus, all expert in the deeds of arms. O youths of Greece, said he, what change is this? In your brave fight I only look to see our fleet's whole safety, and if you neglect the harmful field, now shines the day when Greece to Troy must all her honors yield. O grief, so great a miracle, and horrible to sight, as now I see, I never thought could have profaned the light. The Trojans brave us at our ships, that have been heretofore like faint and fearful deer in the woods, distracted evermore with every sound, and yet scape not, but prove the torn-up fare of lynxes, wolves, and leopards, as never born to war. Nor durst these Trojans at first siege, in any least degree, expect your strength, or stand one shock of Grecian chivalry. Yet now, far from their walls, they dare fight and our fleet maintain, all by our general's cowardice, that doth infect his men, who, still at odds with him, for that will needs themselves neglect, and suffer slaughter in their ships. Suppose there was defect, beyond all question, in our king, to wrong Aeacides, and he, for his particular wreak, from all assistance cease. We must not cease to assist ourselves. Forgive our general then, and quickly too. Apt to forgive are all good-minded men. Yet you, quite void of their good minds, give good, in you quite lost, for ill in others, though ye be the worthiest of your host. As old as I am, I would scorn to fight with one that flies, or leaves the fight as you do now. The general slothful lies, and you, though slothful too, maintain with him a fight of spleen. Out, out! I hate ye from my heart, ye rotten-minded men. In this ye add an ill that's worse than all your sloth's dislikes. But as I know, to all your hearts my reprehension strikes, so thither let just shame strike too. For while you stand still here, a mighty fight swarms at your fleet. Great Hector rageth there, hath burst the long bar and the gates. Thus Neptune roused these men, and round about the Ajaces did their phalanxes maintain their station firm, whom Mars himself, had he amongst them gone, could not disparage, nor Jove's maid that sets men fiercer on. For now the best were chosen out, and they received the advance of Hector and his men so full that lance was lined with lance, shields thickened with opposed shields, targets to targets nailed, helms stuck to helms, and man to man grew, they so close assailed. Plumed casques were hanged in either's plumes. All joined so close their stands, their lances stood, thrust out so thick by such all-daring hands, all bent their firm breasts to the point, and made sad fight their joy of both. Troy all in heaps struck first, and Hector first of Troy, and as a round piece of rock, which with a winter's flood is from his top torn, when a shower, poured from a bursten cloud, hath broke the natural bond it held within the rough steep rock, and jumping it flies down the woods, resounding every shock, and on, unchecked, it headlong leaps, till in a plain it stay, and then, though never so impelled, it stirs not any way. So Hector hereto throated threats to go to sea in blood, and reach the Grecian ships and tents, without being once withstood. But when he fell into the strengths the Grecians did maintain, and they fought upon the square, he stood as fettered then. And so the adverse sons of Greeks laid on with swords and darts, whose both ends hurt, that they repelled his worst, and he converts his threats by all means to retreats, yet made as he retired, only to encourage those behind, and thus those men inspired. Trojans, Dardanians, Lycians, all warlike friends stand close. The Greeks can never bear me long, though tower-like they oppose. This lance, be sure, will be their spoil, if even the best of gods, I thundering Juno's husband, stirs my spirit with true abodes. With this all strengths and minds he moved, but young Deiphobus, old Priam's son, amongst them all was chiefly virtuous. He bore before him his round shield, tripped lightly through the prease, at all parts covered with his shield, and him Meriones charged with a glittering dart, that took his bull-hide orby shield, yet pierced it not, but in the top itself did piecemeal yield. Deiphobus thrust forth his targe, and feared the broken ends of strong Meriones' lance, who now turned to his friends. The great hero, scorning much by such a chance to part with lance and conquest, forth he went to fetch another dart left at his tent. The rest fought on. The clamour heightened there was most unmeasured. Teucer first did flesh the massacre, and slew a goodly man-at-arms, the soldier Imbrius, the son of Mentor, rich in horse. He dwelt at Pedasus, before the sons of Greece sieged Troy, from whence he married Metesicaste, one that sprung of Priam's bastard bed. But when the Greek ships, double-oared, arrived at Ilion, to Ilion he returned, and proved beyond comparison amongst the Trojans. He was lodged with Priam, who held dear his natural sons no more than him. Yet him, beneath the ear, the son of Telamon attained, and drew his lance. He fell as when an ash on some hill's top itself topped wondrous well, the steel hews down, and he presents his young leaves to the soil. So fell he, and his fair arms groaned, which Teucer longed to spoil. And in he ran, and Hector in, who sent a shining lance at Teucer, who, beholding it, slipped by and gave it chance on Actor's son, Amphimachus, whose breast it struck, and in flew Hector at his sounding fall, with full intent to win the tempting helmet from his head. But Ajax with a dart reached Hector at his rushing in, yet touched not any part about his body. It was hid quite through with horrid brass. The boss yet of his targe it took, whose firm stuff stayed the pass, and he turned safe from both the trunks, both which the Grecians bore from off the field. And Phimachus Menestheus did restore, and Stichius to the Achaean strength. The Ajaces that were pleased still most with the most hot services on Trojan Imbrius seized. And as from sharply bitten hounds a brace of lions force a new slain goat, and through the woods bear in their jaws the course aloft, lift up into the air. So up into the skies bore both the Ajaces Imbrius, and made his arms their prize. Yet not content, O Iliades, enraged to see their dead his much beloved Amphimachus, he hewed off Imbrius's head, which swinging round bull-like he tossed amongst the Trojan priests, and full at Hector's feet it fell. Amphimachus's decease, being nephew to the god of waves, much vexed the deity's mind, and to the ships and tents he marched, yet more to make inclined the Grecians to the Trojan bane. In hasting to which end Idomeneus met with him, returning from a friend, whose ham late hurt, his men brought off, and having given command to his physicians for his cure, much fired to put his hand to Troy's repulse, he left his tent. Him, like Andremon's son, Prince Thoas, that in Pleuron ruled, and lofty Chalcedon, the Aetolian powers, and like a god was of his subjects loved, Neptune encountered, and but thus his forward spirit moved. Idomeneus, Prince of Crete, O whither now are fled those threats in thee, with which the rest the Trojans menaced? O Thoas, he replied, no one of all our host stands now in any question of reproof, as I am let to know. And why is my intelligence false? We all know how to fight, and, fear disanimating none, all do our knowledge right. Nor can our harms accuse our sloth, not one from work we miss. The great God only works our ill, whose pleasure now it is, that far from home, in hostile fields, and with inglorious fate, some Greek should perish. But do thou, O Thoas, that of late hast proved a soldier, and was wont, where thou hast sloth beheld, to chide it, and exhort to pains, now hate to be repelled, and set on all men. He replied, I would to heaven that he, whoever this day doth abstain from battle willingly, may never turn his face from Troy, but here become the prey and scorn of dogs. Come then, take arms, and let our kind assay join both our forces. Though but two, yet being both combined, the work of many single hands we may perform. We find that virtue co-augmented thrives in men of little mind, but we have singly matched the great. Thus said, the god again with all his conflicts visited the venturous flight of men. The king turned to his tent, rich arms put on his breast, and took 2 darts in hand, and forth he flew. His haste on made him look much like a fiery meteor, with which Jove's sulphury hand opes heaven, and hurls about the air bright flashes, showing a land, abodes that ever run before tempest and plagues to men. So in his swift pace showed his arms. He was encountered then by his good friend Meriones, yet near his tent, to whom thus spake the power of Idomen. What reason makes thee come, thou son of Molus, my most loved, thus leaving fight alone? Is't for some wound, the javelin's head still sticking in the bone, desirest thou ease of? Bring'st thou news? Or what is it that brings thy presence hither? Be assured, my spirit needs no stings to this hot conflict. Of myself thou seest I come, and loath, for any tense love, do deserve the hateful taint of sloth. He answered, only for a dart he that retreat did make, were any left him at his tent. For that he had, he brake on proud Deiphobus's shield. Is 1 dart all? Said he. Take 21, if thou like, for in my tent they be. They stand there shining by the walls. I took them as my prize from those false Trojans I have slain. And this is not the guise of one that loves his tent, or fights afar off with his foe. But since I love fight, therefore doth my martial star bestow. Besides those darts, helms, targets bossed, and corslets bright as day. So wise, said Merion, at my tent and sable bark, may say I many Trojan spoils retain, but now not near they be, to serve me for my present use, and therefore ask I thee, not that I lack of fortitude to store me with my own, For ever in the foremost fights that render men renown, I fight when any fight does stir, and this perhaps may well be hid to others, but thou knowest, and I to thee appeal. I know, replied the king, how much thou weighest in every worth. What needst thou therefore utter this? If we should now choose forth the worthiest men for ambushes in all our fleet and host, for ambushes are services that try men's virtues most, since there the fearful and the firm will as they are appear. The fearful altering still his hue, and rests not anywhere, nor is his spirit capable of the ambush constancy, but riseth, changes still his place, and croucheth curiously on his bent haunches, half his height scarce seen above the ground, for fear to be seen, yet must see, his heart with many a bound offering to leap out of his breast, and ever fearing death. The coldness of it makes him gnash, and half shakes out his teeth. Where men of valor neither fear, nor ever change their looks, from lodging the ambush till it rise, but since there must be strokes, wish to be quickly in their midst, thy strength and hand in these, who should reprove, for if far off, or fighting in the prease, thou shouldst be wounded, I am sure the dart that gave the wound should not be drawn out of thy back, or make thy neck the ground, but meet thy belly or thy breast, in thrusting further yet when thou art furthest, till the first, and before him thou get. But on, like children let us not stand bragging thus, but do, lest some hear and past measure chide, that we stand still and woo. Go, choose a better dart, and make Mars yield a better chance. This said, Mars swift Meriones with haste a brazen lance took from his tent, and overtook, most careful of the wars, Idomeneus, and such too in field as harmful Mars, and Terror, his beloved son, that without terror fights, and is of such strength that in war the frighter he affrights. When, out of Thrace, they both take arms against the Ephyran bands, or against the great-souled Phlegians, nor favour their own hands, but give the grace to others still, in such sort to the fight march these two managers of men, in armours full of light. And first spake Merion, on which part, son of Deucalion, serves thy mind to invade the fight? Is't best to set upon the Trojans in our battle's aid, the right or left-hand wing, for all parts I suppose employed. To this the Cretan king thus answered, in our navy's midst are others that assist, the two Ajaces, Teucer too with shafts the expertest of all the Grecians, and though small, is great in fights of stand. And these, though huge he be of strength, will serve to fill the hand of Hector's self, that Priamist, that sturdier for blows, it shall be called a deed of height for him, even suffering throes for knocks still, to outlabour them, and bettering their tough hands, inflame our fleet. If Jove himself cast not his firebrands amongst our navy, that affair no man can bring to field. Great Ajax Telamonius to none alive will yield, that yields to death, and whose life takes Ceres' nutritions, that can be cut with any iron, or pashed with mighty stones. Not to Aeacides himself he yields for combat set, though clear he must give place for pace and free swing of his feet. Since then the battle, being our place of most care, is made good by his high valour, let our aid see all powers be withstood that charge the left wing, and to that let us direct our course, where quickly feel we this hot foe, or make him feel our force. This ordered, swift Meriones went, and forewent his king, till both arrived where one enjoined. When in the Greeks' left wing the Trojans saw the Cretan king, like fire in fortitude, and his attendant in bright arms so gloriously endued, both cheering the sinister troops, all at the king addressed, and so the skirmish at their sterns on both parts were increased, that as from hollow bustling winds engendered storms arise, when dust doth chiefly clog the ways, which up into the skies the wanton tempest ravisheth, begetting night of day. So came together both the foes, both lusted to assay, and worked with quick steel either's death. Man's fierce corrupterous fight set up her bristles in the field with lances long and light, which thick fell foul on either's face. The splendor of the steel in new scoured curates, radiant casques, and burnished shields did seal the assailer's eyes up. He sustained a huge spirit that was glad to see that labor, or in soul that stood not stricken sad. End of the 13th book, Part 1. The 13th book of Homer's Iliads, Part 2. Thus these two disagreeing gods, old Saturn's mighty sons, afflicted these heroic men with huge oppressions. Jove, honoring Aeacides, to let the Greeks still try their want without him, would bestow yet still the victory on Hector and the Trojan power. Yet for Aeacides, and honor of his mother queen, great goddess of the seas, he would not let proud Ilion see the Grecians quite destroyed, and therefore from the hoary deep he suffered so employed great Neptune in the Grecian aid, who grieved for them, and stormed extremely at his brother Jove. Yet both one goddess formed, and one soil bred, but Jupiter precedence took in birth, and had more knowledge, for which cause the other came not forth of his wet kingdom, but with care of not being seen to excite the Grecian host, and like a man appeared, and made the fight. So these gods made men's valors great, but equalled them with war, as harmful as their hearts were good, and stretched those chains as far on both sides as their limbs could bear, in which they were involved past breach, or loosing, that their knees might therefore be dissolved. Then, though a half-grey man he were, Crete's sovereign did excite the Greeks to blows, and flew upon the Trojans, even to flight. For he, in sight of all the hosts, Othryoneus slew, that from Cabesus, with the fame of those wars, thither drew his new-come forces, and required, without respect of dower, Cassandra, fairest of Priam's race, assuring with his power a mighty labor, to expel, in their despite, from Troy the sons of Greece. The king did vow, that done, he should enjoy his goodliest daughter. He, in trust of that fair purchase, fought, and at him threw the Cretan king a lance, that singled out this great assumer, whom it struck just in his naval stead. His brazen curates helping not, resigned him to the dead. Then did the conqueror exclaim, and thus insulted then, Othryoneus, I will praise, beyond all mortal men, thy living virtues, if thou wilt now perfect the brave vow thou madest to Priam, for the wife he promised to bestow. And where he should have kept his word, there we assure thee here, to give thee for thy princely wife the fairest and most dear of all our general's female race, which from his Argive hall we all will wait upon to Troy, if with our aids and all thou wilt but raise this well-built town. Come, therefore, follow me, that in our ships we may conclude this royal match with thee. I'll be no jot worse than my word. With that he took his feet, and dragged him through the fervent fight, in which did Asius meet the victor, to inflict revenge. He came on foot before his horse, that on his shoulders breathed, so closely evermore his coachman led him to his lord, who held a huge desire to strike the king. But he struck first, and underneath his chin, at his throat's height, through the other side, his eager lance drave in, and down he bustled like an oak, a poplar or a pine, hewn down for shipwood, and so lay. His fall did so decline the spirit of his charioteer, that, lest he should incense the victor to impair his spoil, he durst not drive from thence his horse and chariot. And so pleased with that respective part Antilochus, that for his fear he reached him with a dart about his belly's midst, and down his sad course fell beneath the richly builded chariot. there labouring out his breath. A horse Antilochus took off, when, grieved for this event, Deiphobus drew passing near, and at the victor sent a shining javelin, which he saw and shunned, with gathering round his body in his all-round shield, at whose top with a sound it overflew, yet seizing there, it did not idly fly from him that winged it. His strong hand still drave it mortally on Prince Hypsenor. It did pierce his liver, underneath the veins it passeth. His shrunk knees submitted him to death. And then did love Deiphobus miraculously vaunt. Now Asius lies not unrevenged, nor doth his spirit want the joy I wish it, though it be now entering the strong gate of mighty Pluto, since this hand has sent him down a mate. This glory in him grieved the Greeks, and chiefly the great mind of martial Antilochus, who though to grief inclined, he left not yet his friend, but ran and hid him with his shield, and to him came two lovely friends, that freed him from the field, Mecisteus, son of Echius, and the right nobly born Alastor, bearing him to fleet, and did extremely mourn. Idomeneus sunk not yet, but held his nerves entire, his mind much less deficient, being fed with firm desire, to hide more Trojans in dim night, or sink himself in guard of his loved countrymen. And then Alcathous prepared work for his valor, offering fate his own destruction, a great hero, and had grace to be the loved son of Aeaetes, son-in-law to Prince Aeneas' sire, Hippodamia marrying, who most inflamed the fire of her dear parents' love, and took precedence in her birth of all their daughters, and as much exceeded in her worth, for beauty answered with her mind, and both with housewifery, all the fair beauty of young dames that used her company. And therefore, being the worthiest dame, the worthiest man did wed of ample Troy. Him Neptune stooped beneath the royal force of Idomen, his sparkling eyes deluding, and the course of his illustrious lineaments so out of nature bound, that back nor forward he could stir, but as he grew to ground, stood like a pillar or high tree, and neither moved nor feared, when straight the royal Cretan's dart in his mid-breast appeared. It brake the curates, that were proof to every other dart, yet now they cleft and wrung, the lance struck shaking in his heart. His heart with panting made it shake, but Mars did now remit the greatness of it, and the king, now quitting the brag fit of glory in Deiphobus, thus terribly exclaimed, Deiphobus, now may we think that we are evenly famed, that 3 for 1 have sent to Dis. But come, change blows with me, thy vaunts for him thou slewest were vain. Come, wretch, that thou mayest see what issue Jove hath. Jove begot Minos, the strength of Crete. Minos begot Deucalion. Deucalion did beget me, Idomen, now Creta's king, that here my ships have brought to bring thyself, thy father, friends, all Ilion's pomp, to naught. Deiphobus at 2 ways stood, in doubt to call someone with some retreat to be his aid, or try the chance alone. At last the first seemed best to him, and back he went to call Anchises' son to friend, who stood in troop the last of all, where still he served, which made him still incense against the king, that, being amongst his best their peer, he graced not anything his wronged deserts. Deiphobus spake to him, standing near, Aeneas, prince of Trojans, if any touch appear of glory in thee, thou must now assist thy sister's lord, and one that to thy tenderest youth did careful guard afford, Alcanthous, whom Creta's king hath chiefly slain to thee, his right most challenging thy band. Come therefore, follow me. This much excited his good mind, and set his heart on fire against the Cretan, whose childlike dissolved not in his ire, but stood him firm, as when in hills a strength relying boar alone, and hearing hunters come, whom tumult flies before, up thrusts his bristles, whets his tusks, sets fire on his red eyes, and in his brave prepared repulse doth dogs and men despise. So stood the famous for his lance, nor shunned the coming charge that resolute Aeneas brought. Yet, since the odds was large, he called with good right to his age war-skilled Ascalaphus, Aphareus, Meriones, the strong Deipyrus, and Nestor's honourable son. "Come near, my friends," said he, "and add your aids to me alone. Fear taints me worthily, though firm I stand and show it not. Aeneas, great in fight, and one that bears youth in his flower, that bears the greatest might, comes on with aim direct at me. Had I his youthful limb to bear my mind, he should yield fame, or I would yield it him." This said, all held in many souls one ready helpful mind, clapped shields and shoulders, and stood close. Aeneas, not inclined with more presumption than the king, called aid as well as he, divine Agenor, Helen's love, who followed instantly, and all their forces following them, as after bellwethers the whole flocks follow to their drink, which sight the shepherd cheers. Nor was Aeneas' joy less moved to see such troops attend his honoured person, and all these fought close about his friend. But two of them, past all the rest, had strong desire to shed the blood of either, Idomen and Cytherea's seed. Aeneas first bestowed his lance, which the other seeing shunned, and that, thrown from an idle hand, stuck trembling in the ground. But Idomen's, discharged at him, had no such vain success, which Oenomaus' entrails found, in which it did impress his sharp pile to his fall. His palms tore his returning earth. Idomeneus straight stepped in, and plucked his javelin forth, but could not spoil his goodly arms, they pressed him so with darts. And now the long toil of the fight had spent his vigorous parts, and made them less apt to avoid the foe that should advance, or when himself advanced again, to run and fetch his lance. And therefore in stiff fights of stand he spent the cruel day, when coming softly from the slain, Deiphobus gave way to his bright javelin at the king, whom he could never brook. But then he lost his envy too. His lance yet deadly took Ascalaphus, the son of Mars, quite through his shoulder flew the violent head, and down he fell. Nor yet by all means knew wide-throated Mars his son was fallen, but in Olympus' top sat canopied with golden clouds. Jove's counsel had shut up both him and all the other gods from that time's equal task, which now about Ascalaphus strife set. His shining casque Deiphobus had forced from him, but instantly leaped in Mars-swift Meriones, and struck with his long javelin the right arm of Deiphobus, which made his hand let fall the sharp-topped helmet, the pressed earth resounding therewithal. When vulture-like Meriones rushed in again and drew from out the low part of his arm his javelin, and then flew back to his friends. Deiphobus, faint with the blood's excess, fallen from his wound, was carefully conveyed out of the press by his kind brother by both sides, Polites, till they gat his horse and chariot that were still set fit for his retreat, and bore him now to Ilion. The rest fought fiercely on, and set a mighty fight on foot, when next Anchises' son, Aphareus Calitorides, that ran upon him, struck just in the throat with his keen lance, and straight his head forsook his upright carriage, and his shield, his helm, and all with him fell to the earth, where ruinous death made prize of every limb. Antilochus, discovering well that Thoon's heart took check, let fly and cut the hollow vein that runs up to his neck, along his back part quite in twain. Down in the dust he fell, upwards, and with extended hands bade all the world farewell. Antilochus rushed nimbly in, and looking round made prize of his fair arms, in which affair his round-set enemies let fly their lances, thundering on his advanced targe, but could not get his flesh. The god that shakes the earth took charge of Nestor's son, and kept him safe, who never was away, but still amongst the thickest foes his busy lance did play, observing ever when he might far off or near offend. And watching Asius' son, in prease he spied him, and did send, close coming on, a dart at him, that smote in midst his shield, in which the sharp head of the lance the blue-haired god made yield, not pleased to yield his pupil's life, in whose shield half the dart, struck like a truncheon burned with fire, on earth lay the other part. He, seeing no better end of all, retired in fear of worse, but him Meriones pursued, and his lance found full course to the other's life. It wounded him betwixt the privy parts and navel, where to wretched men that war's most violent smarts must undergo, wounds chiefly vex. His dart Meriones pursued, and Adamas so strived with it, in his misease, as doth a bullock puffin storm, whom in disdained bands the upland herdsman strive to cast, so fallen beneath the hands of his stern foe, Alcides did struggle, pant, and rave, but no long time, for when the lance was plucked out, up he gave his tortured soul. Then Troy's turn came, when with a Thracian sword the temples of Deipyrus did Helenus afford so huge a blow, it struck all light out of his cloudy eyes, and cleft his helmet, which a Greek there fighting made his prize. It fell so full beneath his feet. Atrides grieved to see that sight, and threatening shook a lance at Helenus, and he a bow half drew at him. At once outflew both shaft and lance. The shaft Atrides' curate strook, and far away did glance. Atrides' dart of Helenus the thrust-out bow-hand struck, and through the hand stuck in the bow, Agenor's hand did pluck from forth the nailed prisoner, the javelin quickly out, and fairly with a little wool, and wrapping round about the wounded hand, within a scarf he bore it, which his squire had ready for him. Yet the wound would needs he should retire. Pisander, to revenge his hurt, right on the king ran he. A bloody fate suggested him to let him run on thee, O Menelaus, that he might by thee in dangerous war be done to death. Both coming on, Atrides' lance did err. Pisander struck Atrides' shield, that brake at point the dart. Not running through, yet he rejoiced as playing a victor's part. Atrides, drawing his fair sword, upon Pisander flew. Pisander from beneath his shield his goodly weapon drew, two-edged with right sharp steel and long, the handle olive tree, well polished, and to blows they go. Upon the top struck he Atrides' horse-haired feathered helm. Atrides on his brow, above the extreme part of his nose, laid such a heavy blow, that all the bones crashed under it, and out his eyes did drop. Before his feet in bloody dust, he after and shrunk up his dying body, which the foot of his triumphing foe opened and stood upon his breast, and off his arms did go. This insultation used the while. At length forsake our fleet, thus ye false Trojans, to whom war never enough is sweet. Nor want ye more impieties, with which ye have abused me, ye bold dogs, that your chief friends so honorably used. Nor fear you hospitable Jove, that lets such thunders go. But build upon't, he will upbuild your towers that clamber so, for ravishing my goods and wife in flower of all her years, and without cause, nay, when that fair and liberal hand of hers had used you so most lovingly. And now again ye would cast fire into our fleet, and kill our princes if ye could. Go to, one day you will be curbed, though never so ye thirst, rude war by war, O Father Jove. They say thou art the first, in wisdom, of all gods and men, yet all this comes from thee, and still thou gratifiest these men, how lewd soever they be. Though never they be cloyed with sins, nor can be satiate, as good men should, with this vile war, satiety of state, satiety of sleep and love, satiety of ease, of music, dancing, can find place, yet harsh war still must please past all these pleasures, even past these. They will be cloyed with these, before their war joys. Never war gives Troy satieties. This said, the bloody arms were off, and to his soldiers thrown, he mixing in first fight again, and then Harpalion, kind king Pylium's son, gave charge, who to those wars of Troy his loved father followed, nor ever did enjoy his country's sight again. He struck the targe of Atreus' son full in the midst. His javelin steel yet had no power to run the target through, nor had himself the heart to fetch his lance, but took him to his strength, and cast on every side a glance, lest any his dear side should dart. But Merion, as he fled, sent after him a brazen lance, that ran his eager head through his right hip, and all along the bladder's region. Beneath the bone it settled him, and set his spirit gone amongst the hands of his best friends, and like a worm he lay, stretched on the earth, which his black blood imbrued, and flowed away. His corse the Paphlagonians did sadly wait upon, reposed in his rich chariot to sacred Ilion. The king his father following, dissolved in kindly tears, and no wreak sought for his slain son, but at his slaughterers incensed Paris spent a lance, since he had been a guest to many Paphlagonians, and through the priests it pressed. There was a certain augur's son that did for wealth excel, and yet was honest. He was born, and did at Corinth dwell, who though he knew his harmful fate, would needs his ship ascend. His father, Polyidus, oft would tell him that his end would either seize him at his house upon a sharp disease, or else among the Grecian ships by Trojans slain. Both these together he desired to shun, but the disease at last and lingering death in it, he laughed, and war's quick stroke embraced. The lance betwixt his ear and cheek ran in, and drave the mind of both those bitter fortunes out. Night struck his whole powers blind. Thus fought they, like the spirit of fire, nor Jove loved Hector knew how in the fleet's left wing the Greeks his down-put soldiers slew, almost to victory. The god that shakes the earth so well helped with his own strength, and the Greeks so fiercely did impel. Yet Hector made the first place good, where both the ports and wall, the thick rank of the Greeks' shields broke, he entered and did scull, where on the grey sea shore were drawn, the wall being there but slight, Protesilaus' ships, and those of Ajax, where the fight of men and horse were sharpest set. There the Boeotian bands, long-robed Ions, Locrians, and brave men of their hands, the Phthian and Epeian troops did spritefully assail, the godlike Hector rushing in, and yet could not prevail to his repulse, though choicest men of Athens there made head, amongst whom was Menestheus' chief, whom Phidias followed. Stichius and Bias, huge in strength, the Epeian troops were led by Meges and Philides' cares. Amphion Dracius before the Phthians Medon marched, and Meneptolemus, and these with the Boeotian powers bore up the fleet's defence. Oileus by his brother's side stood close, and would not thence for any moment of that time. But as through fallow fields black oxen draw a well-joined plough, and either evenly yields his thrifty labour, all heads couched so close, to earth they plough the fallow with their horns, till out the sweat begins to flow, the stretched yokes crack, and yet at last the furrow forth is driven. So toughly stood these to their task, and made their work as even. But Ajax Telamonius had many helpful men, that when sweat ran about his knees, and labor flowed, would then help bear his mighty sevenfold shield, when swift Iliades the Locrians left, and would not make those murderous fights of priests, because they wore no bright steel casques, nor bristled plumes for show, round shields, nor darts of solid ash, but with the trusty bow, and jacks well quilted with soft wool, they came to Troy and were, in their fit place, as confident as those that fought so near, and reached their foes so thick with shafts, that these were they that brake the Trojan orders first. And then the brave armed men did make good work with their close fights before, behind whom having shot, the Locrians hid still, and their foes all thought of fight forgot, with shows of those far-striking shafts. Their eyes were troubled so. And then assuredly from the ships and tents the insulting foe as miserably fled to Troy, had not Polydamas thus spake to Hector: Hector, still impossible 'tis to pass good counsel upon you, but say some god prefers thy deeds. In counsel wouldst thou pass us too? In all things none exceeds. To some God gives the power of war, to some the sleight to dance, to some the art of instruments, some doth for voice advance. And that far-seeing God grants some the wisdom of the mind, which no man can keep to himself, that, though but few can find, doth profit many, that preserves the public weal and state, and that, who hath, he best can prize. But for me, I'll relate only my censure what's our best. The very crown of war doth burn about thee, yet our men, when they have reached thus far, suppose their valors crowned and cease. A few still stir their feet, and so a few with many fight, sparse thinly through the fleet. Retire then, leave speech to the rout, and all thy princes call, that here in councils of most weight we may resolve of all, if having likelihood to believe that God will conquest give, we shall charge through, or with this grace make our retreat and live. For I must needs affirm I fear the debt of yesterday, since war is such a god of change, the Grecians now will pay. And since the insatiate man of war remains at fleet, if there we tempt his safety, no hour more his hot soul can forbear. This sound stuff Hector liked, approved, jumped from his chariot, and said, Polydamas, make good this place, and suffer not one prince to pass it. I myself will there go, where you see those friends in skirmish, and return. When they have heard from me, command that your advice obeys, with utmost speed. This said, with day-bright arms, white plume, white scarf, his goodly limbs arrayed, he parted from them like a hill, removing all of snow, and to the Trojan peers and chiefs he flew, to let them know the counsel of Polydamas. All turned and did rejoice, to haste to Panthus' gentle son, being called by Hector's voice, who through the forefights making way looked for Deiphobus, King Helena's, Asiades, Hirtacian Asius, of whom some were not to be found unhurt or undeceased, some only hurt and gone from field. As further he addressed, he found within the fight's left wing the fair-haired Helen's love, by all means moving men to blows, which could by no means move Hector's forbearance. His friends miss, so put his powers in storm, but thus in wonted terms he chid. You with the finest form, impostor, woman's man, where are in your care marked all these, Deiphobus, King Helenus, Asius Hirtacides, Othryoneus Acamas? Now haughty Ilion shakes to his lowest groundwork, now just ruin falls upon thy head past rescue. He replied, Hector, why chidst thou now? When am I guiltless? Other times there are for ease, I know, than these. For she that brought thee forth not utterly left me without some portion of thy spirit, to make me brother thee. But since thou first broughtst in thy force to this our naval fight. I and my friends have ceaseless fought to do thy service right. But all those friends thou seek'st are slain, excepting Helenus, who parted wounded in his hand, and so Deiphobus. Jove yet averted death from them, and now lead thou as far as thy great heart affects. All we will second any war that thou endurest, and I hope my own strength is not lost, though least I'll fight it to his best, nor further fights the most. This calmed hot Hector's spleen, and both turned where they saw the face of war most fierce, and that was where their friends made good the place about renowned Polydamas, and godlike Polypete, Palmus, Ascanius, Morris at Hippotion did beget, and from Ascania's wealthy fields, but even the day before arrived at Troy, that with their aid they kindly might restore some kindness they received from thence. And in fierce fight with these, Phalces and tall Orthius stood, and bold Cebriones. And then the doubt that in advice Polydamas disclosed, to fight or fly, Jove took away, and all to fight disposed. And as the floods of troubled air to pitchy storms increase, that after thunder sweeps the fields, and ravish up the seas, encountering with abhorred roars, when the engrossed waves boil into foam, and endlessly one after other raves, so ranked and guarded the Ilians marched, some now and then, more upon more in shining steel, now captains, then their men. And Hector, like man-killing Mars, advanced before them all. His huge round target before him, though thickened like a wall, with hides well couched with store of brass, and on his temples shined his bright helm on which danced his plume. And in this horrid kind, all hid within his world-like shield, he every troop essayed for entry, that in his despite stood firm and undismayed. Which when he saw and kept more off, Ajax came stalking then, and thus provoked him, O good man, why fright'st thou thus our men? Come nearer, not art's war in war makes us thus navy bound, but Jove's direct scourge, his armed hand makes our hands give you ground. Yet thou hopest of thyself our spoil, but we have likewise hands to hold our own as you to spoil, and ere thy countermands stand good against our ransacked fleet, your hugely peopled town our hands shall take in, and her towers from all their heights pull down. And I must tell thee time draws on, when flying thou shalt cry to Jove and all the gods, to make thy fair-maned horses fly, more swift than falcons, that their hoofs may rouse the dust, and bear thy body hid to Ilion. This said, his bold words were confirmed, as soon as spoke. Jove's bird, the high-flown eagle, took the right hand of their host, whose wings high acclamations strook from forth the glad breasts of the Greeks. Then Hector made reply, Vain-spoken man and glorious, what hast thou said? Would I, as surely were the son of Jove, and of great Juno born, adorned like Pallas, and the god that lifts to earth the morn, as this day shall bring harmful light to all your host and thou. If thou dare stands this lance, the earth before the ships shall strow, thy bosom torn up, and the dogs, with all the fowl of Troy, be satiate with thy fat and flesh. This said, with shouting joy, his first troops followed, and the last their shouts with shouts repelled. Greeks answered all, nor could her spirits from all show rest concealed. And to so infinite a height all acclamation strove. They reached the splendors struck about the unreached throne of Jove. End of the 13th book, Part 2.